Look, if you're tired of hearing that your offer looks cool, only for that prospect to just vanish into thin air, you are definitely not alone. It's an incredibly painful reality. But what if I told you it's actually not because your product is bad? It's probably because you might be missing the underlying psychological triggers that actually compel people to take action. So in this explainer, we are going to decode the dark psychology tactics being used by top marketers right now. And just to be super clear right out of the gate, we aren't learning these to manipulate anyone. No way. We're decoding them so you can genuinely empower your clients to make the best decisions for their lives and for their businesses. All right, let's dive right into this explainer. This is what we're calling the Persuasion Playbook. It's essentially your map to transforming buyer hesitation into decisive action. We're going to look at 10 of the most intensely effective psychological strategies drawn straight from our source material, all organized to completely transform how you approach sales and communication. To make this super easy to digest, we've broken the playbook down into 4 major thematic shifts. Number 1, the problem. 2, the persona. 3, the promise. And 4, the path. So let's kick things off with our first major shift, the problem, which is all about shifting from complacency to urgency. Here's the thing. Most people simply won't move until staying where they are feels more painful than the friction of changing. And that brings us to tactic 1, moving from latent pain to realized pain. It's kind of like that old analogy of a frog in a pot of slowly boiling water. They're comfortable, they're getting by, but they don't realize the actual danger they're in. Your job isn't to be cruel here, it's to raise the temperature with absolute clarity. So, step 1, you ask them, well, what happens if you're doing the exact same thing 3 years from now? That uncomfortable silence you get? That is their latent complacency waking up into a realized need. Then, step 2, future pace the cost. Don't just say they'll be stuck. Vividly describe the frustration of missing out while their competitors pull ahead. And finally, step 3, agitate the stakes. Make them emotionally feel what staying put actually costs them today. That extreme clarity? That's the exact moment they start searching for a way out, and you become that way out. And honestly, this sets up another brilliant tool in our problem phase, which is tactic 6, objection inversion. As this quote perfectly puts it, objections aren't walls, they're doors waiting to be opened. Let's say a prospect gives you the classic deal breaker like, I just can't afford it right now. Instead of awkwardly defending your price or listing out your ROI, you completely flip it. You agree with them, and you say, look, if getting clients and increasing revenue is exactly what you're struggling with, isn't that exactly why we're having this conversation in the first place? You take their core resistance and invert it into the exact logical reason they absolutely must buy right now.
Moving right along, this brings us to our second shift, the persona. We're shifting from being a guru to becoming a relatable ally.
Because here is kind of a funny, ironic truth about marketing. Presenting yourself as this perfectly polished expert actually repels audiences. People just don't connect with perfection. To make that shift, we use tactic 3, the pit of darkness. The rule here is simple but powerful. The lower the pit, the higher the payoff. Nobody buys the pristine, flawless origin story. They buy the comeback. If you just say, oh, I used to be stuck, but now I'm rich and happy, there's literally no emotion there. You have to share the moment you hit absolute zero in your bank account. You know, the moment you were sitting on the floor crying over a ghosted invoice that you desperately needed to pay rent. When you share that darkest moment, the part where it just sucked the most, people see themselves in your struggle. They stop just admiring you from afar, and they start offering you unbreakable trust. Now, if you're listening to this and feeling a bit of imposter syndrome, tactic 4 is exactly what you need. It's called the adventurer frame. You do not need to be the unrelatable expert standing alone at the top of the mountain. It's unapproachable. You just need to be the in-motion adventurer. You're simple holding the flashlight, walking slightly ahead on the path, testing what works in real time, and just inviting the client to come along for the ride. This kind of transparency actually turns a perceived lack of expertise into your greatest superpower. So how do you solidify that trust once you're on the path together? You use tactic 5, throw rocks at the enemy. Sometimes, honestly, the absolute best way to deeply connect with your audience is to stand firmly against something together. You aren't being overly negative, you're actually being immensely loyal to them. By throwing metaphorical rocks at common enemies, things like toxic grind culture or sleazy sales tactics, or those overnight success gurus, you instantly transform from being just another vendor pitching a service into a fiercely protective ally. You're saying out loud what they wish they could say, and suddenly, you've built a tribe. All right, we've reached the third shift on our agenda. The promise. This is all about shifting from selling a service to offering an identity upgrade. Because at the end of the day, people aren't just buying to solve some surface-level problem. As the playbook points out, people don't buy coaching. They buy how they think coaching will change them. This right here is Tactic 7, future pacing, in action. To really make this work, you have to use what copywriters call Polaroid language. Don't just tell a client you'll run their ads or build out their funnels. Boring. Tell them to imagine waking up, walking the dog, grabbing a cup of coffee, and opening their phone to see leads that automatically rolled in while they were fast asleep. You are painting this incredibly vivid window into their future and letting them take their brand new life for a spin. We can actually take this a step further with Tactic 8, status shift framing. Think about the before identity of, say, an overworked freelancer versus the after identity of a respected expert. You have to clearly define this identity shift for your buyers. We really need to stop talking about features and start talking directly to identity. Because when you promise someone that they're going to go from blending in with the crowd to standing out as the absolute authority that clients chase after, you're offering a massive upgrade to their self-perception. And the psychological reality is, buyers will fight much harder to protect a new identity than they ever will to simply solve a pain point.
And to lock this in perfectly, we use Tactic 9, identity activation. You basically shift your messaging to proudly declare, this is for people who, when you frame your offer this way, saying something like, look, if you're the kind of person who obsesses over making things better, you are in the exact right place. It completely stops feeling like a marketing pitch. Instead, it feels like this deeply personal sense of belonging. The sale doesn't actually happen when they click the buy button. It happens the exact moment the buyer reads your words and says to themselves, yeah, that's me.
Finally, we arrive at our fourth and final shift, the path. Shifting from complex demands to simple choices.
To naturally transition from making complex demands to offering really simple choices, we pull Tactic 2 from our playbook, perceived control. Let's be real, people absolutely hate being sold to, right? But man, they love to buy, especially if they feel like they are the ones making the decision. You aren't dragging them to a sale, not at all. Instead, you are laying down stepping stones. By asking for little micro agreements like, hey, would it be all right if I shared a few ideas based on what you just told me? You ensure the buyer feels like they are completely in control of the conversation, even though, behind the scenes, you are the one who strategically chose the path.
And to make absolutely sure they walk that path to the very end, you need Tactic 10, dangerous simplicity. Just compare a grueling 175-page playbook filled with 17 jargon-heavy steps to a one-sentence shortcut to get leads while you sleep. Complexity kills deals because it feels like a chore, but dangerous simplicity, that creates massive momentum. If you can make what you offer feel incredibly obvious and make that next step feel right within reach, they will confidently take it every single time. Which brings us to the end of our Persuasion Playbook and leaves us with a very important, kind of provocative question. These tactics, from realizing pain to leveraging dangerous simplicity, they're being used all around us, every single day. So will you ignore these tools, or will you use them to actually help people make better decisions? The psychology here is undeniably potent, but how you wield it is entirely up to you. I challenge you to use this playbook to genuinely help your clients win. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this completely transforms how you view the art of persuasion, and I'll catch you on the next one.